Howdy, folks. Happy Wednesday. Happy hump day. We have some playoff games to talk about, an unusual mid-playoff trade between the Rangers and Carolina Hurricanes, some other news and events. Russ, get us started with the pre-show.
Yeah, so let's talk about actually, what was the pre-show going to be now?
WFAN.
Yes, WFAN has done it again. They have decided that they should rename themselves Grudge Radio. Because at this point, all they're trying to do is bring up any grudge that existed in New York and get somebody on air to talk about it. Because they started with Mike Francesa, who for years has been at it, not happy with the morning show. So they decided to let him call up and just scream at them and make a video and hope a lot of people see it. Now they went with Chase Utley, who went out of his way in the baseline to slide into Ruben Tejada, broke his leg, essentially ruined his career. And so they had Chase Utley on. They knew the Met fans would hate Chase Utley, whether he was right or wrong, whether he apologized or not. And actually, to be honest, at least Chase Utley said, hey, through David Wright, I sent him a bottle of tequila to kind of try and smooth things over. I give Chase Utley credit for that. I do. Because end of the day, while it looked deliberate, maybe it wasn't. And so it does show that the guy wasn't cold and heartless. So I have no more angst for Chase Utley in that regard. But FAM was hoping for the opposite because, they could post a link that says, oh, Chase Utley's on FAN, and Met fans go ahead and tear into him. And then on the screener end, they wouldn't even let all the Met fans tear into him. So, I just don't understand New York sports talk radio anymore, at least on that station. I don't get it.
Yeah, they're just whipping him into a frenzy. And I came up with a couple. I was like, okay, let's get Goose Gossage and George Brett in there, and they'll debate the Pine Tar incident. That or old Cleveland pitcher John Denny who beaned Reggie Jackson.
Let's get Blowhard Dan Marino on to talk about the fake spike for 1,000th time. Oh yeah, well, here's how the fake spike went. Or let's get Mark Sanchez on to talk about the butt fumble. This is just idiot radio.
Yeah, if Marino was on there, so I'm sure somebody would call up and ask him if he had snorted cocaine out of the isotoner gloves that he sold.
I can't follow that up.
Anyway, I have to mention this because, I get this. It's like, and I have purposely tried to be circumspect when it comes to spoilers of certain things. We mentioned on Monday LaShawn McCoy being a complete jackass.
I called him a dick.
For his tweet regarding Avengers Endgame, which by the way made about $1 billion in week one, and now
over $1 billion,
over $1 billion, and then now maybe I'll have a chance to actually see it now.
Actually, Mike, I can tell you how it ends if you want to know.
Yeah, you can save it till later. But I was fairly careful on Monday when I mentioned Game of Thrones, not to give out what everybody thought was the big spoiler. And then I got a response from somebody who said that I let the cat out of the bag in a different way. And I'm like, honestly, this is the point of view that I am taking now when it comes to spoilers. If you haven't seen a movie in the first weekend, or you haven't seen a TV show after 24 hours after it originally aired, it's on you. Kiss my butt. I am not worried about being a spoiler, because if it's that big of a deal for you, watch the damn thing.
Well, for one, Mike, this is a great apology. I think you've really taken a step in the right direction. Two, this has been building for a while with a lot of shows, right? It's like, so basically people out there, because there are streaming services, because in the old days there weren't streaming services, and unless you bought a DVD of the series, people spoiled stuff all the time.
Sure.
At dinner parties, Tupperware parties, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
But now, because there's Twitter and more people can see things and are aware of it, it's gotten to the point where people act like you're ruining their life.
Yeah.
Because you said it.
Yeah.
I got to tell you something. When somebody posts a spoiler, if I've accidentally seen it, unless I'm seeing that thing tomorrow or it just happened, I may not watch that series for 2 years. I'll forget.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of it. It's like, it's not that important to me.
And remember back in the day, if you're listening to the radio and you've VCR taped or now DVR'd a game, and you don't want to know the result of the game. If you're listening to AM radio and they're doing the sports updates, it's on you. You just can't. You can't listen. You got to listen to a cassette. I'm dating myself. A cassette or a CD or if you put yourself in the position of finding out the score before you watch the game. Or now going on social media, there's no way you can go on Twitter or Facebook and say, okay, I'm not going to be surprised that the Leafs lost Game 7. I mean,
you can't live your life
exactly. And you know what? I have a friend who we came out. I can't remember what was going on. There was a Jets game on, and we were having a minor hockey meeting at our community club about something. There's like 50 people in there, and in the meeting, I said, "Oh, by the way, I'm alert went off. Jets are up 2-1 or something." And all of a sudden, my friend, who's my neighbor, goes, "Why'd you do that?" And I said, "Look, it's your obligation to say no one mentioned the game. It's not mine.
Right?
I'm not like it's not on me in a public place where people are talking about hockey to stand up and you could have said, well, if you're taping the game, so how big is this guy?" So the thing with movies, right? If you're coming on and watch, like obviously, no one can send us all a message to say don't talk Avengers Endgame, don't talk Game of Thrones or whatever.
Right.
We get that, and we're empathetic to we don't want to ruin it for you, but you guys, everyone's got to take precautions on that. And you know what? And I'm really, really sorry about Gamora.
Well, and the last thing, and you, Peter, I'm sure, I don't know if you watched Kids in the Hall. When it was on, I think CBC.
Oh yeah.
Back in the day, there was a skit where they had this devil character, and he basically say, "Do you remember the movie Presumed Innocent? His wife killed her." So he ruins. Okay, okay. If I'm doing that, then I'm a jerk. I'm not doing it on purpose, but now it's on you. If you haven't seen it, if you haven't watched it within, I'd say 24 to 48 hours, that is the window. After that, it's free game. I'm unencumbered. I will say whatever I want with no worry that I'm spoiling somebody else.
I mean, Mike is basically saying he's an accidental jerk. It's fine.
Hello, hockey world. Today is Wednesday, May 1st, 2019.
I'm Peter Jesse in Winnipeg.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology, and Fredo did it.
Well, as opposed to our friend Joe Yurden, who's the noted jerk, I'm the purposeful jerk, Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com.
Wait, hold on. Stop the show. Stop the show. I have to tell people I am so sick of people posting these positive things about the Cobra Kai series. I tried watching it. What a hunk of garbage it is. It is literally trying to get me to just – it is basically trying to get you to prey on your memories of loving the Karate Kid and hoping that carries over and watches everybody when they're too old and can't act anymore like Ralph Macchio.
Hell, William Zabka couldn't act.
I know.
When he was the son of the Equalizer on that show on CBS.
I will tell everybody in the chat room and otherwise don't watch it. It's garbage. But some people will anyhow because there's a lot of people online saying, "Oh, it's great," and it's like it's not great. If
it wasn't for Joe Pesci and Marissa Tomei and My Cousin Vinny, Ralph Macchio would have ruined that movie. Okay,
sorry,
no problem. All right, let's start with the games last night in the NHL. The Bruins and Blue Jackets were tied 1-1 going back to Columbus, going back to Nationwide Arena. The Blue Jackets win 2-1. No, I said this throughout the game last night. Watching this game, Columbus is out Bruinsing the Bruins.
Yeah,
they're bigger, they're faster, they're younger, and maybe it's the fact that the Bruins had to go through a 7-game series with Toronto that I don't think was extremely tough, but it's a 7-game series and there was a lot of hitting. But Columbus benefited from the 4-game sweep of Tampa. But you can see that they were rusty in game 1. They got 2 goals. Boston tied it up late 1 in an overtime. Game 2, I thought Columbus was stronger as the game went along. And Russ, last night, I thought Columbus was the better team. They got the lead. There was a disputed goal late in the second period. They got the Bruins on the board. It was a goal across.
It was a goal,
yeah. But I thought throughout the game that Columbus was the better team.
No question about it. I mean, again, you could look at the hit count, and they almost doubled the Bruins. But again, that's home cooking. But you could see Columbus was out hitting them. You could see that Pierre-Luc Dubois seriously hurt Pasternak by just getting him on the right spot with a check. You could see that at the end of periods, the Bruins defense was tiring. You could see that the Bruins third pair, like Clifton, can't give the middle of the ice to Boone Jenner at any point in the game, or you're going to get lit up like they did. All those things you could see. If I'm Bruce Cassidy, I have got to go the other way. I can't try and play that game anymore. I need some more young legs in the lineup. I can't rely on just experience. Pasternak's playing probably 40% now. And now I have to make some real decisions here because I don't think the Bruins can beat Columbus at their own game either. So they have to try something else. If they don't, they're going to get eliminated.
And not just Pasternak. I know from the Toronto series. I mean, Krejci got hurt in game 1.
Yeah.
DeBrusque got hurt in the Leaf series, purportedly.
He scored already since. So
right, but I think he's not. I mean, nobody's 100%.
No.
I think Krug is not at 100% because
I'm not 100%. My knee hurts today.
I'm never 100%. But I'm saying they're showing their battle wounds. But as we were talking about last night, Russ, it's like they have young guys like Vakanainen. They might be able to insert in the lineup, but that's not Cassidy. Cassidy's going to stick at forward with his experienced guys like Achari and Corrali.
And he's going to lose.
And he probably will lose, but last night he played Clifton, who's a rookie. But I think if Moore was 100% healthy or closer to 100% than he is right now, I think Moore would be in there, or Kevin Miller, or it probably stops at Steven Kampfer because they played one game in the Toronto series.
Everything stops at Steven Kampfer.
But Peter, I mean, I don't know how much of this game you saw, but I think where Boston is in trouble is the fact that Columbus is fresher, and they're getting performances out of their forwards like Josh Anderson, like Nick Foligno. They're laying the body on the Bruins defense to the point that I think the Bruins defense is near exhausted.
Yeah, they as you said, Mike, they're out-bruinsing the Bruins, but more importantly, I think, is that they're not relying on a certain player to be a hero. This is win by committee. It's there's no, yes, they have a Duchesne. Yes, yes, they've got acquired guys, and yes, they have a great team, but there's no one there who's a top 10 player in the league in any one position. There's some great players, but maybe Bobrovsky, right? But this is really something that I said in the last episode, where Torts is in their heads in the right way. And I think, like when you've got a feisty John Tortorella and he's figured out how to pull the right strings.
Yeah.
And he talked a little bit about this before the playoffs and what he saw in the team and what needed to change. And he's figured out, you're going to channel Torts' energy. You're going to channel his intensity. And that right now is like the Blue Jackets on the ice are acting like a talisman of energy, and the Bruins are the recipient of it in all facets.
That's a great point.
And don't you wish doesn't every coach want to find a way to get their team to do this, because it's the ideal way to win games in terms of things. It's not just all goonery. It's not just, and we'll get to goonery, I'm sure.
Yes.
It's about playing with a level of intensity and everyone on the same page. It's fun to watch.
Yeah, I will say this too. Unless you want to go first, Mike.
No, I was just going to say the one thing I'm impressed with is the fact that I was looking at the minute breakdown last night. You've got Seth Jones playing 28 minutes. I mean, he's young and he can do that. Werenski and David Savard playing 23 minutes. I mean, if they had Ryan Murray in the lineup, he probably would play close to 20 minutes or around there. But they're playing three defensemen. I haven't seen three defensemen play this much, Russ, since 07, since the Anaheim when they loaded up Niedermeyer, Pronger, and Boschman. They've all played around 22, 23, and sometimes closer to 30.
And 2010, the Blackhawks did too.
Well, no, you're right. No, well, not 2010, but
not 2010, the one after that. Sorry.
2015 when right, exactly. But it's unusual to do that. But they can do that because all three of these guys are relatively young, and Harrington, Clendenning, and Kukin. I mean, Kukin played 17 minutes, Clendenning played 9, and Harrington played 15. So they're really loading up on Seth Jones and on the other two.
Well, and that's a good point. On Facebook, I had some Bruins fans, some really good ones, sort of knocking me when I said Seth Jones is one of the best players in this series, and he's the best defenseman in this series. And they don't want to admit it, but he's got 4 points in 3 games. He's playing like an absolute rock-hard stud on defense.
Right.
He has been a huge problem for the top line and any line. And that's a part of the reason. Bob is great, but I think it's a little lazy just to sort of give all the credit to Bob and say, oh, he's playing out of his mind. Great. Right. But you have to play out of your mind anyhow in the playoffs. It's not like Tuukka Rask is playing poorly. So you have to look at something else. You have to look a little deeper. Look at Seth Jones.
Yeah, and I also think, Peter, it's team defense. I mean, really, you can't put all the weight on those three defensemen. Tortorella's got them all buying in. It's a 5-man unit in the defensive zone. They're all working. They're all trying to get that puck out of the zone. It's impressive, and it should send a signal to teams like Toronto. And I have to bring this up because Toronto played Boston and Columbus is playing Boston. The Leafs could learn a lot of lessons from what Columbus is doing against Boston, because that is something that they couldn't do against the Bruins and ended up costing them the series.
We mentioned this before, and that the modern day defenseman now doesn't have to be what you hope to find in an Al McInnes or a Brian Leetch. It needs to be someone who's got puck handling skills, has the vision, and can make a first pass and get the puck out quick. Like, that's what you want, because when the puck's outside your zone, it's not being shot at your goalie.
True.
And it makes all the difference in how the rest of your team plays. And Columbus is doing a marvelous job of incorporating that aspect into their game and giving their forwards options.
So, Peter, you're a parent. I want to give you a segue here. So we saw, like with Matt Duchene, he has his goal celebration, and a little kid on YouTube copies it. Matt Duchene answers to it on Twitter, says this is great because, Matt Duchene's a very positive guy. What if your kid plays Pee-wee hockey and does what Brad Marchand did and says to you, hey, I saw this on TV and it's okay? What do you do?
Well, great segue, Russ.
Thank you.
That was an awesome segue. What do you do as a parent and a coach, and a former coach? You're sitting there going, well, what you just did could have cost us the game, no matter what, could cost us the next game. And it's selfish. It's what you wanted, not what the team wanted, not what anyone else wanted as a group. So your selfish action it could affect others in a negative way because you think it's a good idea. I mean, now let's get into the meat and potatoes of it. The NHL is now deciding that a random donkey punch to the back of the head is acceptable. It's okay.
In the playoffs, it is.
In the playoffs, it is. And here's what I've said this at our meetings for our hockey association, and I've said it to our chief of officials. I said, when you guys don't do your job, you are one bad check away from the wrong parent sitting there who's prepared to be a martyr. And that martyr, when the kid does something wrong and you guys have let things go and there's witnesses watching around and that parent has already made their FU money and says, I'm taking you all down. That's what you need to think about every time. And I said, and they hire my favorite law firm, Dewey, Screw 'em, and Howe. They're really good. And they decide it doesn't matter to me. My kid's now has a brain injury. His life is ruined. Someone's being held to account so someone else doesn't have to go through this.
I mean, I'm sure
you know what? The NHL owes it to every other player to hold Brad Marchand account in a significant way, because you know what? my favorite talking idiot, Greg Wyshynski, put up something on his tweets today that said, "Oh, well, no, the NHL never holds Brad Marchand to account, showing the fines and everything he's had in the last 3 or 4 years, or whatever it is." Bravo, Wish. You're such a great researcher. But the point being is, it doesn't do anything.
Right.
So somehow Kadri is the villain in all this.
Right.
And we're all hoping he changes, but Brad Marchand doesn't have to change. I mean,
he has to change.
What's difference? Honestly, what's the difference between Sean Avery and Brad Marchand? I can't see a difference.
The difference is Brad Marchand scored 100 points. That's the difference.
Yeah.
It's the star system in this league where Alex Ovechkin gets away with crap.
Oh, Evgeny Malkin.
Now Marchand, he's been suspended because there was no way not to suspend him for submarining Sammy Salo or other things that he's done. Kadri, I mean, it was funny because there was a discussion about this on Toronto radio this morning with a reporter that I'm friends with on Twitter, and he says the NHL clearly does not suspend for stupidity. And I said, well, yes, they do. Look at Nazem Kadri, because Kadri was stupid for doing the same stupid thing that he did last year, this year. But he got penalized. He may actually learn from it. I mean, he's being beaten over the head in Toronto for his stupidity and repeating the same act that he did last year. Will Brad Marchand learn from it? Well, no, because he's not being suspended for punching a guy in the back of the head.
I will tell you this. When I was asked this morning, I don't think it's a suspendable offense, but I do think the NHL should make a big deal about it and should have said on Twitter, hey, he's going to have to call the office and we're going to discuss this. And there should be a big fat fine.
Right.
There should be.
I have a feeling in the new CBA that there's going to be, I mean, because we know games cost in terms of salary, but I have a feeling that one of the things that's going to be a negotiating point will be an increase in the fines that the league can put out. Because right now it's what, $5,000 is the max or something ridiculous thing like that. And the only way that you cost the player a larger chunk is if you suspend them for a game or 2 games and then they lose the revenue from the game or 2 games. Maybe that will help, because honestly, if he gets fined $100,000 for that, you think he's going to do it again? Maybe he's stupid enough that he will do it, but maybe it'll give him a moment of pause.
But what he did was a negative, because like Peter said, now the refs aren't going to be inclined to give them a call because they're going to be mad because now there's a light shown on this that they didn't want. Right. So there's that because of an inaction, and so you have that. You have the fact that Columbus didn't really react the way I think Marchand hoped they would.
Right.
And which shows that Tortorella's got a good hold on his team. So the act itself didn't do anything. And Peter's right. There's probably teammates that were probably shaking their heads like, what the hell is this idiot doing?
Well, I mean, there were teammates last year. I mean, I heard from other reporters that were disgusted at the licking thing that Marchand did. And at a certain point, he'll always get support from his team because he's a great player and because he's one of those. He's a very important player to that team. But I'm sorry. Eventually, someone is going to catch Brad Marchand. Somebody he is slighted on the ice. Somebody he's slew-footed. Someone is going to turn around and bash him across the head with a stick, or do something that they'll get suspended for. And it's only his fault because of the stuff that he does.
Well, let's talk about also other dirty play. We saw more from Torrey Krug with Oliver Borkstrand, and you had pointed out, they already had a fight in this series. And it's just like the Bruins need to stop relying on this kind of stuff. It's not going to win them this series. It did win them a series against the Leafs because, like Mike pointed out, there was no antidote for the Leafs. They didn't have a way. Columbus has a way, and their coach knows that way. So now Bruce Cassidy's got to do a better job of actually coaching instead of relying on these kinds of tactics to win. They have enough guys. Again, I don't see – and even the writers are like, well, what do you expect to bring in and, insert young player name. And it's like, you know what? For a game, you try it because that guy might win you a game.
I mean,
that guy might give you something that the other guy can't because he's healthy.
Are you telling me that it would kill them to put Studnicka in there?
Yeah.
Instead of the big kid. Yeah, I mean, it's one forward. I mean, you're talking 8-9 minutes.
Yeah.
Instead of putting Carson Kuhlman in there, put Zach Senyshyn. I'm just throwing.
They put Carson Kuhlman in there because Krejci said he likes him.
And because he's fast.
But he did say Krejci. I think that played into it because they're trying to fire up David Krejci too. I get it. It didn't work. Try something else.
What the solution might be for Boston in game 4 is they'll probably double down and put Backus back in the lineup and try to get more physical. And I don't think it's going to work against Columbus, but we'll see. The other game last night, San Jose and Colorado in a similar position of Boston and Columbus. Both they were tied 1-1 after Colorado beat San Jose in game 2 in San Jose. This was a fairly dominant performance by the Sharks. I not at one point did I really think that Colorado was going to win. There were moments that they were back in the game, but I thought the Sharks were fairly in control of this game. They went 4-2. Logan Couture, I believe he had the hat trick, Russ. I mean, he's got 9 goals right now in the playoffs. I think that's leading the NHL in goals, which, by the way, I'm very happy because I have him in my playoff hockey pool. Looking at this, I mean, this is a relatively young, relatively inexperienced Colorado team with a lot of talent. McKinnon is unbelievable, but this could be the last kick at the can, Peter, for a lot of these guys in San Jose. Thornton, Pavelski, maybe, a couple other their veteran players. And I think that, that is what is fueling their sort of desperation right now.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of variables there, and you sort of have to wonder that, San Jose is going to have a busy offseason.
Yes.
They've got a lot of things to consider, and the fact that they're sort of entering into that dreaded no man's land with a couple of contracts, and that's with Burns and Vlasic and the amount of money they're making, and if they want to keep Karlsson, it's tough, and they're an aging group.
Yeah,
like the people who they're paying money to are getting older. And they're about to look like the Chicago Blackhawks soon and have none of the cups behind them to justify it all.
Right.
That's the scary thing for San Jose. And, it's going to be fascinating to see if they fail and don't get to the Stanley Cup final. And if they get close, if they make it and they get close and don't win, it's going to be a fascinating balance of understanding what went wrong and is what they did repeatable. And I don't think it is necessarily next season if they don't make some changes and adjust some cap situation.
Well, I mean, you got 3 big names that are going to be UFAs, Russ. I mean, Thornton, Pavelski, and Karlsson. And I mean, it sounds like it's leaning toward Karlsson going to the open market. We don't know. But again, looking at what they did, they were very similar to Columbus. Vlasic, 24 minutes. Karlsson, almost 23 minutes. Burns 28 minutes 27 seconds. So they're loading up on their 3 big guys, and I think they're relying on that mix between young guys like Meyer and Hertl, who played to almost 22 minutes, and the veteran guys like Thornton and Pavelski.
But here's where I'll say it's a little different for them, Peter, than Chicago. First thing is that, look, they get to another cup and lose. They can call up any ex-Buffalo Bill and find out what it's like. That's easy. That's first thing.
Andre Reed on speed dial, Jesus.
But they still have a load of guys in their system, which is something Chicago had traded them all away. They haven't done that. Wilson hasn't done that. They've got Ryan Merkley. They've got Mario Ferraro, who this year had a really good year. Dylan Gambrell's playing already. Like, they have guys. Sasha Chmelevski, look him up. He's been terrific this year. They have other guys. They do. So
Junior,
yeah. So they don't have a problem there. They will have a problem with the cap, and they'll have to insert more youth. But Timo Meier, that's a guy who I brought up a lot, and he had a great year. For some reason, when the playoffs started, people forgot about him. He's got 8 points in 10 games, but he also assisted on that Couture goal, which was a big assist on that goal. I think just as much as Couture, people forgetting about him, Timo Meier has sort of helped out Logan Couture get out of the rut of last year too, being a really good line mate and being able to match his speed and being really good around the net and having good hands. That's been a big key too. I will tell you this one funny thing about Couture. So at the draft, whatever year it was, I always forget draft years. I had asked him because somehow I had gotten word from somebody. I said, "Hey Logan, are those all your natural teeth?" And he said, "Yes. My mother's very proud of that. She's happy. I made it all through juniors, all with his regular teeth." And I think last year I watched a video where he got a tooth knocked out, and because he always used to wear, mouth protection, and I felt bad, because I knew that was like a goal of his to keep all his teeth. But he's just a great kid besides a great hockey player. So I'm happy for all the success he has. And I do think that some of these players do get marginalized because they play for the Sharks and they don't get shown on national TV a lot.
That's true.
And they don't see them a lot and they forget how good they are. And that's something where I think if the Sharks make it to another cup, these guys all get more notoriety. Now, I don't know if they'll make it to the cup, but this is a nice run for them. And I think the experience that they have is the reason it's the reason I picked them over the Avalanche, because I felt like their experienced forwards would be too much for the Avalanche defense. And so far that's holding up, but we'll see.
So far, but I mean, Brent Burns is doing everything to undo that. I mean, that was maybe the worst pass I've seen in this playoffs. And I spent 82 games watching Tyler Myers.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. And I will tell you this too. Someone asked me on Twitter, Russ, how does San Jose cover Nathan MacKinnon? And I wrote back, you can't.
No.
There's no way to cover this guy.
Peter, I spent 3 game sevens watching Jake Gardner go -10. So
here we go.
I think that equals Tyler Myers.
One does not try to cover Nathan MacKinnon. One tries to contain him.
You can't stop him. You can only hope to contain him.
Hey, look, I'll be a Browns fan. I watched Ernest Biner fumble on the goal line. Okay, good. Now we're good. Let's go.
I watched Scott Norwood kick it right. Anyway, okay, 2 games tonight. Hurricanes and Islanders. Hurricanes leading 2-0. But I don't know if there's going to be any players left for the Hurricanes by the end of the series, the way they're dropping like flies. They lost 3 guys in game 2 on Sunday. Menelainen, one of their fourth-line forwards. Trevor Van Riemsdyk, who's out with a shoulder injury. Menelainen had broke a finger, I believe. He had surgery on his hand. He's probably out for the
he was playing pretty well as a physical fourth-line guy. He was.
Yeah, and most importantly for them, Mrazek, who had played well in the first couple games until the injury. They bring in McElhinney. He made 17 saves for the win in game 2. Now he will be the oldest starter to start a playoff game in the history of the league. Almost 36 years old. He's going to be the oldest starter when he starts tonight.
So here's my question on that one. When I heard that, I looked it up because I said to Peter when I texted, I thought it was Glenn Hall. Glenn Hall was 37 in the playoffs. Did he not start? Is that the thing?
No, but it was his first start.
Oh, his first start. Thank you. Okay.
That's what it is.
My brain wasn't catching that part. Okay.
Yeah, I mean because Lester Patrick, which was
he's the oldest, but he doesn't count because
that was in relief because the goaltender got hurt. This is he's the oldest first-time starter in the history of the NHL.
Yeah. But he literally was the coach on the bench who had to jump in the game and they win the Stanley Cup. That can't happen anymore, by the way.
No, it'd be interesting to see Ken Holland come out from the press box and hop into net.
No, but there's 2 things we need to bring up, forgetting about the Canes Islanders for a minute. Although the one thing I'll say about the Islanders thing, the fact that Lou is reportedly out on the ice with them means that they're serious about winning game 3. So, and I think they'll play better away from Barclays than they did at Barclays. So Dal Cole will help too. But here's the 2 things with Carolina. The first one, let's get a rule change going here. We can't keep going with, there's the emergency goalie warming up just in case he has to get in this game. Nobody wants an emergency goalie in a playoff game. The team doesn't.
No.
The league doesn't. And it almost happened. And so they do need to make some sort of rule change where at least, if nothing else, Carolina can bring their AHL goalie and let him sit in the stands. And if, God forbid, something happens, you could use him. And you let it be like a roster exemption. We don't want to see an emergency goalie in a playoff or Stanley Cup game.
Well, I mean, okay. I mean, the thing is, NHL teams have 4 call-ups after the deadline.
Yeah.
it's very. The Leafs called up Michael Hutchinson. Now they called him up because they had no confidence in Garrett Sparks.
Yeah, that's the only reason.
But Garrett, if as Hutchinson's wife was having a baby in games 1 and 2, between game 1 and game 2, Sparks was the backup. So they had the third goalie there. I mean, it's up to the general manager to either save one of those call ups or there is that flexibility there. The problem is like, and I brought this up because I've been writing some previews and recaps for this series. Nedeljkovic, Charlotte is in the Calder Cup playoffs right now. Now right. they don't start until Friday, and they think Mrazek will be back by Friday for game 4. But if he's not, then all of a sudden the Charlotte Checkers don't have their starting goaltender. Now, obviously, the priority here is the NHL team, but still, it's like even if you had the flexibility to have 3 goaltenders, do you really think they're going to bring up Nedeljkovic? They'll probably bring up whoever his backup is in the AHL.
Well, in that situation, yes, but I'm just saying I don't think it should be a regular roster thing. I think it should be just a rule that you could have a goalie there, a real goalie that's in your organization just in case. I don't see why not. I don't see what the harm is. But so the other part, the Adam Fox deal, right? So let's talk about that. So I've seen him play all throughout his Harvard career, internationally, winning medals with Team USA, all of it. I was there for a lot of it and a lot of it live, even in the Beanpot recently. Adam Fox, if I had to put a percentage, I'd give you he's an 85% chance of making the NHL as a regular for a very long time. Mm-hmm. I think he can make it next year. I do. And I think having a full season now, off season, and chance to go through camp, rookie camp, training camp, all that will be a big help because he can work with Quinn. Quinn knows him. I think that's a good seamless transition. So let's talk about what the Rangers gave up. So they gave up a second-round pick this year and a third-round pick next year, which can turn into a second. So if you want to go on the high end and say a second-round pick has a 45% chance of making it to the NHL, let's go the high end. And that is probably the high end. So the Rangers get a defenseman, perceivably, that will sign with them and have a year in there. For the Ranger fans that say, why didn't they just wait? And for one thing, he wasn't going to just come out and say, I'm not going back to school. If the Rangers didn't do this, he would have just gone back to school and then probably would have waited and seen what happened next August. I don't think this August was ever playing into it. I think this was the move by the Rangers to try and get him under contract, and I believe they will. So that's one thing. The other thing is, for the pick's sake, you're basically now telling me for the best case scenario in this trade that you've got 2 guys that have a 45% chance of making it to the NHL in the next 5 years over a guy who's probably making it to the NHL next year and worst case scenario the year after. And you're telling me as Ranger fans that's too much to give? Stop. And then if you're telling me you did well for Carolina, well, let's go back, even forgetting about this trade, and talk about the bigger trade, Mike, the Calgary trade.
Yeah, first of all, if Fox had not decided that he definitely wanted to go to the Rangers, this is a guy, Peter, that Winnipeg and Toronto and any other team that was cap-strapped would have gone out and tried to lobby like crazy because he's going to sign a 2 or 3 year deal on an ELC, probably with bonuses. But even if he hits the bonuses, he's going to probably make, $2.5 million in his first 2 years. And and if he doesn't, he's going to make $925,000. And he's a right-hand shot defenseman who was a top 3 for the Hobie Baker. Yeah. Of course, the teams would have killed each other to get their hands on this guy. But the trade, I'm sorry, I can't defend Don Waddell on the trade that they made with Calgary last year. Calgary gets Lindholm, they get Hannafin.
And he has 3 points.
Right, they signed them. They signed him to long-term deals. Lindholm has a great year. Hannafin's a top 4 for the Flames. Now, 2 years from now, Carolina might have nothing in this deal. Once Dougie Hamilton's contract expires, Ferland's in UFA. They've traded Fox for a couple draft picks, and Hamilton, who knows if he'll stay in Carolina. This trade was a disaster for Carolina.
Well, I don't know. They're in the second round in Calgary.
Okay, but forget that. That has nothing to do with this. That is
Well, hang on.
window dressing that
So
tries to make everything look okay.
Hold on. It is not a disaster for Carolina. Okay, just wait a second. They still have Dougie Hamilton. We don't know what that is. You can turn Dougie Hamilton into something, and they might. Now there are two ways of looking at this. There are some who, like Russ. We saw our chat, and I think your take is the Rangers got a good deal. I like what you say. I agree with you on that. There are others out there who said they paid too much. Now, the point here is the Rangers had draft picks to burn.
Yes.
Yep.
So they likely got, and the problem is they probably know the Fox is going to sign there. The reason the reason it's a good deal for the Rangers is because no one is going to pay that much because there's no certainty.
Right.
So Waddell got as much as he could for it. Fine. He took a gamble.
Can I stop you there for a sec? So if I'm the GM, right, you already got him in a trade. At some point before January, I would have contacted the people that talk to Adam Fox and say, hey, listen, we traded for him. I need an answer before the playoffs start on whether he's coming here or not. Actually, I need an answer before the trade deadline, to be honest.
Look, I don't disagree with you at all.
Yeah, I mean, you're the GM. You could set that. They waited until ESPN blurbed it over the air that he's not signing with them.
I agree. I totally agree. That doesn't mean the trade's a disaster. It means Waddell handled his asset in a disastrous fashion.
Okay.
Right, I know.
Right? That's different. So Waddell bungles that, and I agree with you 100%. But he had to manage that way better. So now he gets a second and a conditional second and a third. Right? It's a
second and a conditional third are going to be another second. So it could be 2 seconds.
Could be 2 seconds. It's not, 2 seconds isn't bad. So, but if it works out that way, so that's fine. He gets something. Is it the best deal he could have gotten? No, but it's the best deal right now. So blame Waddell for putting himself in that position. And that's not that the trade was bad. That's because Waddell got something and he didn't know how. He didn't manage it the right way.
And the only random element here, Russ, is if Fox didn't tell them until just recently he wanted to go to the Rangers. Because remember,
I believe that's probably true, but set a deadline. Right,
but Jimmy, and I've used the VC comparative here. VC told Nashville, at least that was the story, that he was going to sign with the Preds, and then at the 11th hour changed his mind. Now I don't know if that's true or if it's not true, but it ended up costing the Predators because they could have traded him for probably a first-round pick before then because the hype was so much, and they only ended up getting a third from Buffalo for his rights. So,
and that's my point. You could have probably gotten a low-level first-round pick this year or next year for him if you'd have traded him at the deadline because you set a deadline and you didn't get an answer. And that's exactly the way I would have been as a GM. Hey, it would be great to have him, but if I don't get an answer, I am trading his rights because I can't let this sit any longer. I already included you in a big trade. Like Peter, he's a percentage of that Calgary trade now. Yeah. And that was part of the deal was they wanted Adam Fox, and they didn't get him.
No, they didn't get him.
Acknowledge too.
But right, so but the concept of what they got and what the team is doing, given the fact that we knew where Lindholm and what's his face, sorry,
Hanifin
knew where their salary was and what Dundon's threshold was. Look, short term. It's fine. No one's crying a river for the Carolina Hurricanes. And long term, it might be okay too. But Waddell doesn't get off scot-free because his managing of assets in this was not very good. And he should have been able to have solved this problem later. And thinking of which, what if he'd had those draft picks now or something like before the trade deadline or at the trade deadline that he could have used elsewhere, right? Yeah. It's an interesting scenario. This isn't over in judging this.
No, it's not.
Right. But right now, you have to say if all that's out of here, all that comes out of this at the end of this season is Dougie Hamilton for 2 more years and a couple draft picks, you gotta say you gotta turn this into something, Don.
Right. I mean,
because as an owner, at the end of it, if all you're left with is 2 draft picks and you trade Dougie Hamilton next year and you didn't get a great return, then the question starts coming. I mean, this could be a disaster, but it's not there yet.
The future component to that deal was Fox, because Ferland was an expiring contract. Hamilton had 3 years, now 2 years left of the contract. The future component, you were trading a couple RFAs who were in their early 20s. The future component for Carolina was Fox, and they turned it into a couple second-round picks at best. So I don't know. I mean, we'll see in a couple of years where it goes. But like right now, I mean, I'm sure Carolina's not concerned with that, because right now they're concerned about getting to the Eastern Conference Final. But looking at it, I think they made a bad deal last year, and now it's even worse because they don't have Fox. The other series going tonight is Blues and Dallas Stars. St. Louis is leading 2-1. Russ, just briefly on this, because we got a couple things to touch on before we end. Ben Bishop did not have a strong game in Game 3, and I think that Dallas needs Ben Bishop to be at the top of his game for them to win.
Yeah, there's no question he has to be at the top of his game. They have to get a lot out of Ben and Seguin. Hintz has to continue to be good, Dickinson, all those guys. Everybody has to play their best. And it's a cliche, but really everybody on Dallas has to play their best to beat St. Louis. Some guys don't have to necessarily be their best for St. Louis to beat Dallas, because they have the more talented team. They've got the better blue line. Right now, their goalie is just as good as Ben Bishop. You could say Bishop is better, and I won't argue with you, but they're winning. So you could say he's hanging with Bishop. So really the X factor in this is going to be someone like Tyler Seguin needs a hat trick, or someone like Jamie Benn needs a 2-goal game, or something like that. Jason Spezza is starting to wake up. Maybe Jason Spezza needs to have a 3-point game. Something like that's going to have to happen to shake this up, because right now St. Louis is rolling a bit. Schwartz already had a hat trick. Fabry hasn't even been a huge factor, but he's playing, and he's playing okay. Mm-hmm. Like there's a lot to like here with St. Louis. The blue line's playing really well for St. Louis. Like this is a problem. On paper, it is nice to say, St. Louis doesn't look so good. Parayko, maybe he'll get traded. Pietrangelo, they're going to get traded. Bouwmeester's washed up. But they're on the ice doing well. And when they're on the ice doing well, you don't want to play against those guys.
Right. Peter, what are your thoughts on this? Because you saw St. Louis up close. I mean, they turn it around with a great second half. They have
man. Dallas has got to find a way to slow the Blues down. When they wind up, they become relentless. And basically, Maroon is running around like a wild man, and no one's containing him. No one's doing anything. Maroon shouldn't be the guy doing that, yet here he is. And they've got to figure this out real quick. Bishop's got to play like regular season Bishop. You can't. There's no room for softies anymore, because when you give up a soft one, St. Louis, as I said yesterday, I think St. Louis is just like the 2012 LA Kings. They just don't care.
Yeah.
They okay. Regroup, boom, you score on us, we're coming right back. And if you're giving up a softie, we're going to get 2 more on you. They just feed off of it. So Dallas has got to slow this down. They've got to challenge St. Louis to get through the zone, and they've got to give Bishop some support so he isn't getting caught off guard on some wildly weird play. It's going to be really hard to do.
Okay, news and notes. The Buffalo Sabres coaching search continues. Elliot Friedman reported yesterday that Dave Tippett was interviewed by the Sabres. That's in addition to Todd Richards, Jacques Martin, Chris Taylor. There's a couple other names. The rumors were last week that they might be interested in talking to Sheldon Keefe, the Toronto Marlies coach. And there's also speculation that they may not announce a coach hiring until after the World Championships, because Botterill is part of the management for Hockey Canada going over to Slovakia. Ross, again, like I'm here, and I follow the Sabres, of course, and it's tough for me to buy that a Tippett unless he is not going to be interested in the Seattle job, and he's been part of that organization, leading up to, them taking control or being in the league in 21-22. This is not a a great job. It's not. It's a job with a lot of problems.
No, here's one interesting thing too. Before I get to the Buffalo thing, NHL player safety is tweeting not for what you want it to tweet for if you're the league. Just saying. That's one thing where so many people are chiming in on this. They should have at least fined them. Anyhow,
right.
Back to Buffalo. I'm getting the sense, and this might just be the sense of people online, and Mike, you might have a better pulse because you live in the city. It seems like Sabres fans want them to make a quick decision, and they're doing their due diligence. Like, they're doing the right thing here, but it doesn't seem like the fan base wants that. They seem like hungry for like a name and a name right now.
The fan base is fed up here, Russ.
Yeah.
The fan base is – I mean, this is a team that hasn't made the playoffs since 2011. This is a team that, has been the worst team in the league, 3 times in the last 6 years?
Yeah.
They're fed up. They've spent good money on season tickets. They've been promised, that the tank would bring either Connor McDavid and Eichel, and it brought Eichel, but, Eichel is not McDavid. He's a very good player. They're fed up.
Yeah,
and that's the problem. The problem is they want the big name coach. They've been spurned by and used by Todd McClellan. Now they're talking to Richards. Now they're talking to Tippett. Supposedly Adam Oates was interested in the job. All these names. I think they just want get the coach done, because the Skinner situation may not be addressed until they hire a coach. That's been the speculation around here. So
yeah,
I mean,
I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if that's really a factor. I think if Jeff Skinner said he wants to sign tomorrow, they'd sign him tomorrow.
right.
I really don't think that's a factor. I do think, like I said, I think Skinner thinks it's probably a factor, so maybe he's waiting. But you know what? You can't worry about what Jeff Skinner is going to do right now as a fan, but you can worry about the coach, and I want to see them do their due diligence if I'm a fan, and that is exactly what they're doing. You don't want them to hire just the next name out there. You want them to hire someone with an actual plan who actually can help some of your young stars get to that next level. And that's something where, again, like when Jim Montgomery was hired, that's exactly what Dallas was looking for. They were tired of the Hitchcock type. It doesn't work anymore. He was a recycled name. It didn't work in Edmonton, but Montgomery has. With mostly the same players, he has made it to the playoffs. He didn't wave a magic wand. He's just a guy that's been perfecting his craft and finally got a chance. And I think that's what Buffalo's maybe doing here, is looking for that guy, because Buffalo keeps getting closer to being that team. They do. And if they could do some blue line adjustments this year, they could even get closer, because Olofsson's going to play for him this year. He's not a blue liner, but he's going to put points on the board. If they can get a little better on defense, that next coach could make that jump for them, and you don't want to make that a quick decision.
Well, in the realm of Zach Bogosian screws everything up, Peter, the hip surgery that Bogosian had prevents them from buying him out, and according to Elliot Friedman, it's also going to prevent them from trading Rasmus Ristolainen, because now they don't have enough defensemen. So every evil with the Sabres stems from Zach Bogosian.
Oh, Zach Bogosian, he's the gift that keeps on giving. It's that's just too bad. I mean, I really liked Bogosian when he was first here. It's just an absolute shame that a guy with his size, his ability to skate and stuff, is just basically his whole body has just come undone. And he's a shell of the player he was coming into the NHL. It's a total shame. And
they can't even trade him with a year.
Buffalo's the last team that needs to be having these things going on, like the Tim Horton buried contract, right?
Yeah.
Like,
or Nathan Horton. Yeah,
Nathan Horton. That's not Tim Horton. Nathan Horton. Horton and whatever the other guy's name is.
Buried Boston cream donuts.
Yeah.
Okay. Other news and notes. Elliot Friedman reports Pavel Datsyuk announces that he is not returning to SKA St. Petersburg, that he is leaving the KHL, spurring rumors that he may return to the Detroit Red Wings. Friedman says under Ken Holland, there have been discussions of a possible return to Detroit for next season. He is due in Michigan soon. We'll see where it goes. Russ, this is a young team. They're bringing up guys like Zadina. They're bringing up, they're building around Larkin and Mantha. do they need a almost 40-year-old Pavel Datsyuk who I don't know if, I don't know how good he still is. I mean, he looked good
he's
at
still pretty good. I've seen him play. He could play. I think he'll get you 50 points. We're almost talking about the same thing as Ilya Kovalchuk, except he's good defensively. But at the end of the day, am I doing this? I have to ask myself, if I'm Steve Yzerman, am I doing this to fill those seats that we see that aren't filled? Or am I doing this because I think he could help develop players? That's the big, tough question here, because I only really want to bring him back if he could develop players, because the product on the ice will get me players, fans back in the seats because it's a good market. I don't know. Honestly, if I were the GM, I would shy away from taking Pavel Datsyuk back simply because I want to turn the page from that whole team. And Yzerman was on that team, and it might be best if he turns the page from that. Well,
the mention of Holland there, because there's been some talk about Holland maybe getting into the mix in the Edmonton situation, but more than likely he's staying with Detroit. Peter, I look at this as if he comes back and it's a 1-year deal and it's less than like the 7.5 that he made when he left, if it's like 1 year at $4 million, fine. If he's looking for multiple years, there is no way in hell. As much as he's a Hall of Famer, a respected member of that team. They love him. I get that, but I can't.
You have to go the year-by-year route like Thornton and Chara. Do not do what the LA Kings did with Kovalchuk. It's just that simple. Like these are the moments where teams have to come to their absolute most bare bones economic contractual sense and put hard boundaries in for themselves so they don't make these mistakes. Kovalchuk it's a massive disaster for LA. And the last thing the Detroit Red Wings need is the same thing for Datsyuk. And give him incentive so that if he hits them all, he makes 10 million. Like, you're going to have the cap space.
Right.
Like, do that, but don't lock yourself into 3 years. Don't even do 2 years. Do one, give them all the reason to say, you know what, if you're Datsyukian again, congratulations, we're happy to pay you.
Right, and I'm sure Datsyuk wants to come back and play for the team that he played his entire career with. So you have to play on that. Just like in other situations, and Mitch Marner, I'm sure, and others, a lot of the RFAs, these teams are going to play on the fact that these players want to play in the places that they're playing, and they have to use that. If they don't, then they're in trouble, because then those players, you can't depend on them long term. Last thing, we are going to see, Russ, an increased pipeline of KHL and European forwards, especially this year.
Yep.
I mentioned this in regards to the Leafs, and they signed one of their draft picks, Igor Korshkov, this morning, their second-round pick from 2016. But the name of Ilya Mikheyev, who played for Omsk last year, 24 years old, big winger, led the team in scoring. His name has been mentioned by Drager, by Friedman, and it sounds like he's coming to Toronto after the World Championships. But this is going to be a trend that a lot of teams are going to follow, because you're talking about entry-level contracts for players that are in their early to mid-20s, and it's a free look, basically. It's just a contract. It's one contract.
I mean, same thing as the Adam Fox thing. If I had to, let's say Adam Fox starts next year on the bottom pair and works his way into the top 4. So if I went shopping for that on the free agent market, it's costing me at least $4 million a year, $5 million a year to get somebody who's okay at that, right? Mm-hmm. So to get some of these Russian players, if I was getting the NHL equivalent player to fill in that role, you're getting them for half the price, literally half. Sometimes, more than that. And so you have to do that now. If you're a team that's close to the cap, you have to have those guys out there, finding at least one of those guys to help out the cap situation. And that's why I do think there'll be more of them. And we're starting to hear the murmurs. We'll see when they're finally signed. But yeah, you've got to get more of these guys over, because teams need more entry-level guys on the books to help balance out the other guys. Yeah. That's the reality of this cap era.
And Peter, I would be shocked if Vesalainen is not in the Winnipeg lineup next
year. He'll be there. And I think, I put this in my blog a little while ago, and I said, Jets, a long forgotten Christian Vesalainen. And people, well, who forgot about him? I said, no one talks about him. He was on the Moose to finish the season, do a little playoffs. But this is a guy who went back to the KHL, put up numbers, and the Jets have a cap crunch, and you need to get them in. Like, there's going to be, I'll be writing about this more, but, he has to be a critical part of the Jets salary cap management because he can be. Not because he should be in the NHL, but he can be the cap piece, and he can probably play too.
Right. And that's going to be the situation again with Toronto, not just guys like Korshkov and Mikheyev. I don't think Korshkov's going to make the NHL in his first year, unless he just blows the doors off in training camp. But they've got guys on the Marlies who have played down there. I am convinced a guy like Mason Marchment is going to make the Leafs as a fourth liner next year. Jeremy Bracco, if they trade a Kapanen or Nylander, that Bracco will step in as a top 9, and he's on an entry level contract making $800,000 as opposed to whatever you're going to pay Kapanen or $6.9 million for Nylander. And a team that is in cap trouble needs to save money in strategic places.
Hey, you've got to roll the dice on some of those guys and at least see where they're at and start the early season. Let's get a look-see here and see and go with that. I mean, that's, I don't see why you wouldn't. And I think more teams will do it. I just wrote about for another website today, GTS, Max Lajoie for Ottawa. They drafted him in 2016.
Yep.
They didn't draft him in 2016 thinking he'd be playing in the 2018 season. And if you look at his numbers, you can make the argument that it was miraculous that he started the season and lasted the season. And you know what? He had a pretty good year.
He played pretty well. Yes.
And teams need more of those kinds of guys. And so that's where scouting has now even become more important because there's more pressure.
But the funny thing is, and just to finish off, the funny thing is the team that needs those players the least is a team like Ottawa that has such cap room. The teams like Winnipeg and Tampa and Toronto that are up against the cap, they probably will force these guys, and I'm not saying if they're not ready, but force feed these guys into their lineups because they're inexpensive. So, we'll see that. Okay, great, guys. We'll be back tomorrow with another edition of the HockeyBuzzCast. Oh, yeah, you're right. Thank you for doing that. I was going to say it, and I just was rushing. Condolences go out to the family of Jason Bochford, the reporter for the Vancouver Province. I believe he did some work for The Athletic and TSN Radio in Vancouver. Unfortunately, Jason was 48 years old, passed away this morning due to heart failure. I think we've talked about columns regarding that Jason wrote, and it's really sad. He's young.
I've run into him at drafts.
Yeah, he's young. He's younger than I am, so it gives me a lot of pause when it comes to health and everything that somebody so young has passed away. So we wanted to offer our condolences on.
Yes, amen to that.
Okay. For Russ Cohn, for Peter Tessier, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.